Whoa, maybe more than 3 seconds. This is taking a while. Hi, Minnesota. This is Christy Thompson with Christy Legal, divorce and child custody, paralegal, and mediator. And this is first in a series of Facebook Live events that I'm going to do with professionals who you also need to know when you are divorcing and or handling a child custody case. And today I have with me Ron Johnson of Crosstown Home Team, and he is going to give you some information about real estate property transactions during divorce. And first, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about divorcing. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or you could text them to me, 651-775-7899, or you could also message them to me on Facebook. And all right, so when you're divorcing, there are a lot of things that need to be done, and I'm going to focus on assets because today I'm with a real estate agent, and so that is real estate is for some people the largest asset. So when we are dividing assets, marital assets in Minnesota, first of all, there are two types of assets. There are marital and non-marital. And non-marital assets are assets that either one of you owned before the marriage, or you inherited or were gifted during the marriage. And so we do not divide those assets during the divorce process, except under extreme circumstances that don't apply most of the time. So when you're dividing the assets, the first thing that you need to do is value the assets. And honestly, that is where a real estate agent would come in, because you need to have that house valued just to start the divorce process, because we need to know how much that house is worth in order to divide its value. And then we will value all the other assets, the retirement funds, investment accounts, bank accounts, um, all the stuff in the house, the automobiles, everything. You guys own businesses. I have business valuators who you can work with, or I have a simple process that we could value a very simple business with. Or you guys can decide how you want to value the business your way. Um, and so then we're going to create a marital asset spreadsheet, and we're going to list all those items that you both own and their values. And then we're going to see what the total is at the bottom and see, hey, maybe it's 50-50 already. Maybe it's close to 50-50. And then we don't even need to do anything. We don't even need to juggle the numbers to make them equal or close to equal. Because in the state of Minnesota, assets are divided based on equity, and equity is normally determined to be 50-50. Now, if it's, off, it's like 40-60 or 30-70 or whatnot, then we're going to move some puzzle pieces around to make it more equal. As a last resort, we will, have retirement funds be divided because there can be lots of tax problems with dividing retirement funds. It can be done, but it's not liquid assets for sure. But you guys, tell me what your priorities are, and then from there, we figure out how we're going to divide those assets. And so then we just keep moving it around until you folks each have about 50% of the assets. Now, if you guys don't want to divide the assets 50-50, if it's just what you folks have agreed to, then that's fine. And we will divide the assets, however you would like to, because when you are working together and being amicable, that's what you can do. And another reason that the assets might not be divided 50-50 is because of spousal maintenance. And instead of having spousal maintenance be a monthly payment, there could be a lump sum spousal maintenance benefit. And that could be, we would, do a calculation and figure out how much that lump sum would be based on a bunch of factors. Um, and then, which calculating spousal maintenance is really complicated, so let's not get into that. And but so then the person would get that lump sum upfront, shortly after the divorce process is finalized by the court, instead of getting a monthly payment. There are a lot of benefits to that. Then the payor doesn't have to keep paying, for the X number of years. And the payee doesn't have to worry about receiving the payments. So that's a little bit about assets. And let me turn it over to Ron Johnson and have him tell you about real estate in divorce law. So, Ron, if you could start by just kind of introducing yourself and then give us some information. Thank you
Sure,
so much.
Christy. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on here. So my name, as you mentioned, Ron Johnson. I'm with Crosstown Home Team. I'm the broker owner of an independent real estate brokerage here based in the Twin Cities. I have worked with a number of divorcing couples, both from a standpoint of selling their house that they own together, and then also helping people coming out of divorce purchase um, each of their individual homes, or maybe one person stayed in the home and the other person bought a new home. Uh, so it's a lot of what I've been, just quick disclaimer, I am not an attorney, I'm a real estate agent. So I'm always going to defer to legal advice for things that are a little questionable. But the process of selling your home, whether you're divorced or not, is same. It's just how things are handled from an emotional standpoint. And you mentioned the word, Christy, amicable, how amicable the couple is, or how maybe contentious the situation is. So there are a lot of emotions. That's something as real estate agents we need to be sensitive to in the process. And also, one really big thing is, as realtors, we have an obligation to privacy to our clients. So we're never allowed to give away motivation for why someone is selling a house without the written permission. Generally speaking, if somebody hears this couple's selling their house, they're getting divorced, that's blood in the water, right? So it's my job to protect that couple's situation, because we don't want buyers knowing, okay, well, the court says they've got to sell their house, therefore there's a deal out here. So it's really important for us as real estate agents to protect the privacy of that couple, unless the couple's like, hey, tell everybody we want to get rid of this house, whatever the situation is. But in Minnesota, if you are married, whether you purchased a house together, or one of the people purchased prior and then you moved in, each spouse now has a legal right to that home, and a spouse cannot sell their home without the permission of the other spouse in a homestead situation, meaning that that's your residence where you live. Timing matters, whether you're selling your house while you're getting divorced, or whether you have gotten divorced, everything's signed, everything's finalized. So the timing of that matters with how things happen. And you mentioned equity, Christy. That'll be, like you said, generally the 50-50. Maybe there's some other situation out there to where it is a different matter. But again, that's a legal question that'll be determined in that aspect of it. But the general process is still, if both people are still owners of the home, we need to get signatures on the listing contract and the purchase agreement from both sides. Both sides need to agree on whatever terms. So as an example, Christy, you write a offer on my client's house who's getting divorced. I've got to bring that to both the clients. And generally, right, both have say in what's happening, unless there's some other written agreement that says, okay, she's taking care of it, he's taking care of it, just talk to him, just talk to her, whatever it is. But either way, both parties do need to agree and then sign to negotiate that deal and to finalize the offer and the purchase agreement. So both parties will need to be involved. So that's where some of that management comes with personality management, emotional management, because not everybody's going to agree. There may be some different motivations from either side, and that's where we really have to be balanced on the human side of it. But the actual blocking and tackling process of selling the home is the same, divorced or not. Um, and then everything goes still, get the offer from the buyer, everything works out, we negotiate all those things. We have our terms, have our inspection period, whatever it is, and then title. go through the title process because that's also important as well. Because both parties, again, from a timing standpoint, let's just assume they're both still on title, then it has to go through title and then it gets conveyed to the next buyer. So that process is really a lot of the same. Like I said, it's just a lot of the management and also me protecting that client and not letting the public or the person we're negotiating with know that it's a divorce situation, because that's a big motivator. Because it's, generally speaking, a forced sale. So that really gives the buyer, if the buyer has that information, um, that's really powerful for that buyer to know that they're up against people in a divorce situation. So we want to make sure the privacy is protected. So that's kind of generally from a sales standpoint, selling your house standpoint. And we need to know things like, okay, are both people still staying in the home? Is one of them staying? Who's going to help out? Who's going to be in charge of approving showings? Who's going to be like my main point of contact? Is it both parties? Are they going to handle things internally? Or is it two phone calls for me? Is it one to spouse A and then others to spouse B? Or is spouse A running the point and then they'll talk to spouse B? So a lot of communication has to happen. And it's really important for me as a realtor too, um, not to sort of pick sides, and decide, okay, well, spouse A, we have a good relationship. I know spouse B is kind of being difficult here. So I'm going to just kind of lean on what spouse A is saying. I've got to make sure that I'm doing my job to treat both of my clients in that case equally, no matter what maybe perhaps my personal relationship might be with A or B, or if it's just a business relationship. So and then on the purchase side, because it's very, it depends on what's happening, right? Like if let's just say the divorce decree says you guys have to sell the house, then that's not easy, but it's an easy solution. Like the house is sold, right? So the house is sold, let's say in 50-50 equity. Spouse A gets their 50% of the equity, spouse B gets their 50% of the equity. They can do whatever they want to do with it. Now, whether that's a down payment on the next home or not is up to them. But now to qualify for a new home, they would have to then be able to independently qualify, um, to be able to. So your income, your debt to income ratio has to be correct. Your own, because we hear a lot, right? When in divorce situations, credit sometimes can take a hit. So you have to make sure that the whoever's purchasing the house, your credit is still in order, your debt to income is still in order, and your income can still support that purchase. And you can speak a little more of the nuts and bolts of this, Christy, but the way that child support, if there's child support or an alimony, you need to have show 6 months of payments, and then it should last for the next 3 years. And this is one of those things where this is another thing that needs to be in writing, right? Because there's plenty of couples out there that maybe they're writing a check on the side or just agreeing and all those things. That's not going to show well to a mortgage lender. So you have to be able to show to a mortgage lender that you as an individual can qualify to purchase the house at whatever purchase price that you are going after. But your alimony and child support may be able to count toward that. You just have to be able to show it up on paper. Um, and it can get a little tricky, right? If you have a one breadwinner household and the non-breadwinner is trying to purchase that home, they still have to be able to show that they can afford the home. And maybe that's based on the alimony, or because then if they go out and they have to get a job, then they're going to have to show some history on that job and their income and establish that. So it can be a little tricky, but it's not impossible. And one thing that does come out of divorce potentially is a divorcing spouse could be then qualified as a first-time home buyer. And that's a HUD rule. So anybody divorced or not, if you haven't owned a home, a primary residence in the last 3 years, you can qualify as a first-time home buyer. There are some certain situations where um, if you're a single parent or a spouse who was a homemaker, and then you leave the marriage, exit the marriage, you may qualify immediately under some programs for a first-time home buyer. And first-time home buyer is always a tricky thing. Generally, what it means is you can qualify for certain down payment assistance programs, or maybe a little more lenient terms on a loan as a first-time home buyer. So it's really important to understand that when you get divorced, if you do want to purchase, first of all, you can purchase a home. It's possible if your circumstances are right. So getting divorced, losing that house, the dream house that you had with your, and everything seems like it fell apart. It doesn't mean you're done as far as a home owner. There is a path there. It may take some work. Um, and it may take a lot of work. It may take a little work depending again what that particular situation is. And that's another emotional thing. Let's just again just say married couple both doing fairly well. They own a $600,000 home in what they deem to be a really nice neighborhood, really nice school district, and it's got all the bells and whistles. Well, now as a divorced person making essentially half of the money that you were making for as a household, expectations have to come into play a little bit to what you can expect to be able to afford with just your own single salary. And again, that's not to hurt or crush anybody's dreams, but it's just the reality of it is that you and your spouse together were able to afford that $600,000 house, but now, and you are not, you're not making the same income as a household as you were before, so some expectations may need to adjust there. So that's also another thing that's important to understand the financial part of it. But yeah, from a purchase standpoint, again, depending on where you are with the divorce and the timing of it, and when that you sell your house, when that equity is coming, will determine when you're able to then go purchase that house, unless you have your own cash on the side. So some people are in a situation where all their equity, again, divorced or not, is tied up in their home. So divorce says, okay, you guys have to sell your house. Here's your 50,000. Here's your 50,000. You may not be, but if you've got your own money in the bank, that's yours. Again, depending on where it came from, you can use that money to go purchase your house as well, and then maybe recoup that out of the sale of your house from a timing standpoint. So really, all in all, it's a lot driven by the divorce decree or the separation agreement, or whatever the terms are on that, and then your financial solvency as an individual, and really understanding what all that means. And a mortgage lender in that case would be the best person to tell you, okay, now you're divorced, your spouse is making 100,000, you're making 100,000. Now this is what this looks like. You're getting this money, alimony or not, child support or not, you've got your cash savings and all that, and they'll be able to let you know what it is that you can qualify for and go from there. So then that process, after that's all done, is just like buying a home as anyone else did. So yeah, that's kind of a 5 minute, 6 minute snapshot of what it looks like from both sides. But like I said, a lot of it's driven by the divorce decree and what the attorneys or people like you, Christy, mediators, determine and what's agreed upon. And just really quickly so that's a lot of what like homestead. So you're living in the home. There are situations where maybe one individual in that marriage bought a rental property or had some sort of investment property. You still generally need the other person's spousal approval, but it gets a little difference. Like if they owned it under their own LLC or if they owned it individually. And sometimes it may just be spouse A's investment property, but that's a really particular situation. So most of what I was talking about is a homestead situation, which are primary residence. When you start getting into rental properties and investment properties, maybe a second home, vacation home, that some of the things you were talking about in that asset distribution is where you start getting into that and like when and who purchased that particular property.
Yeah, absolutely. So when the property is not the marital homestead, then it would be considered a business asset. But business assets are also divisible during the divorce process. And so we would still need a real estate agent to value the home. And then if there's anything else associated with that rental property, I don't know, like any equipment to take care of the property, that's at the property that would be taken into consideration. If it's furnished, then the furniture, and how much money is in the bank account for that business. All that stuff would be taken into consideration to value the business, that rental property. Um, but so, you need to, have information about all the pieces of the puzzle before you start trying to put the puzzle together. Contact me for legal information and to start figuring out, what you guys are capable of in this situation before you just start selling houses and making agreements on how you're going to divide the equity in the house. be it the business house or the marital homestead, because um, people usually are divorcing for the first time, and or even if they're divorcing for the second time, they're just laws that they don't know. And then they could, um, you know, sell the house, divide the equity 50-50, but then because of other assets, then oops, now we're also going to have to divide all these other things 50-50. But if we had divided the equity in the home differently, then we wouldn't need to be dividing all these other things 50-50. So that's why we need to, figure out what our priorities financially. Um, and then based on that, then be like, okay, this is how we're going to divide the equity in that house that we're selling. And then your real estate agent, such as Ron, will be able to communicate that to the title closer. And so, Ron, I do have a question for you.
Sure.
There aren't any questions. Nobody sent in any questions, but a question that I thought about is, when people are divorcing and they're not getting along the best, um, how do you know, because I know part of what a real estate agent is supposed to do is to help the clients obtain the maximum dollar amount for their house. So, how do you work with people who aren't being very cooperative with each other, and maybe aren't being very cooperative with you to help them, you know, do repairs or do various things to increase the value of the home?
And I think, again, that's a question in this particular situation where it becomes just having some sensitivity to the emotions that are going on. But also, you always have to reset, right? Like, is the goal to continue to fight, right? Let's say it is a contentious divorce situation. And I guess there's even levels of being contentious, right? But if this is the one thing that's still holding you together, then why fight to stay together when you're trying to get apart from each other, right? So as an example, let's say we get an offer, we like the offer, we accept the offer, the buyer has the inspection, and the buyer wants some fixes, and it's going to cost $500. So pick a number. One spouse is like, all right, let's do it, let's go, and the other person's like, I'm not budging, I'm not giving up another $500. Okay, well then, is that $500 in that example worth staying with this person that you're trying to get away from? So just sort of resetting what the situation is and what the end goal is. Because then let's say that we lose that sale over $500 because that thing was important to that buyer. They're like, okay, fine, you guys don't want to be you want to be difficult to work with? I'm going to walk away. So that buyer walks away. So now we're back out on the market. We're back looking for another home. Um, and then you're now still with that person to try to negotiate the next sale. So you're kind of keeping yourself in the situation that you want to get out of. So just like I said, resetting what the actual goal is. Honestly, sometimes in divorce situations, it's not to get the most money, it's to get the easiest path out. So in the front end of the conversation, we always want to get the most money possible, right? Like there's no secret that real estate agents work on commission. So the more the house sells for, the more money we make. But it's also our job to solve the problem that's in front of us. So some couples may say, you know what? I don't want to fix anything. I don't want to do this, this, and this. I just want to get the house sold and get out of here. Um, and that's fine. And it's our job to still try to get the most money, but also solve what their initial problem is, right? What their initial goal is to get apart from each other. So it comes back to having conversations with both sides and say, okay, hey, remember when we met the first time and you said, okay, our goal was getting the most money. Our goal was I want to get away from this person or somewhere in the middle, right? So you got to kind of reset their minds to what their goal was. Um, and so I think that's one way to handle some of those contentious situations. And also, like I said earlier, sometimes both parties don't want to talk to the agent, right? You may have spouse A, their brother-in-law is a real estate agent, and that's who they're going with. And the other spouse is like, I don't want to take the time to find anybody. Fine, let's go with that person. Um, but you still have to respect the thoughts of the person, spouse B who doesn't have that relationship. If that the realtor's not their brother-in-law, so that realtor can't just listen to what that person's telling them. You need that other spouse to be involved in the situation. But really, at the end of the day, though, if that is the case where one of the spouses is more heavy-handed in the situation, the other spouse still has to sign or not sign. So they still don't get left out in the dark. Um, but yeah, it's just relationship management and resetting what the goals are. And like I said, in that very simple scenario, is $500 not to do the plumbing work worth staying with this person that you're trying to get away from?
Yeah, that is an extremely good point that I'm not sure that I didn't remember because I did recently sell a property that I had owned with an ex-fiance. And yeah, like is your priority getting the most money, or is your priority getting out of it as soon as possible? But like yeah, but not like totally getting robbed.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And
Um
there's a balance in there, right?
Yeah. And so, yeah, I kind of forgot about that. And yeah, and it's whatever your clients want. And then yeah, that's great that you're gonna like check in with them and like, okay, is your top priority here still getting the most money? Or, what is your top priority here? So that's great. And and just to give people a little bit more information about using child support and spousal maintenance, to get a mortgage. Most of the time, you do need to be receiving 6 monthly payments of either the child support or the spousal maintenance for it to count as income for the purposes of the divorce. There are limited circumstances where it can be 3 consecutive monthly payments, but it's usually 6. And a mortgage lender will tell you which applies in your situation. And then you need to be receiving that spousal maintenance for at least 3 years. And what I do with my clients is I say, let's make sure you're receiving that money for at least 3.5 years, because you might not find that dream house um, or a house that you can afford um, immediately. And so if you don't find, that house immediately, you're not going to have that 3 years of spousal maintenance because some of that time will be taken up. So I always say, let's do 3.5 years to give you like 6 months to, actually find a house, get qualified. And, I mean, it takes like what, Ron, usually at least a month just to get to closing.
Yeah, usually 30 days on a quicker one.
Yeah. And Ron, like how long do you think, so like now let's first say if somebody had a lot of money to work with, about how long do you think it might take them to find a house? And then if they didn't have a lot of money to work with, about how long do you think it would take them to find a house?
Yeah, a lot of that's going to be neighborhood driven and city driven and location driven. Um, and just expectation. Like I said, if you're coming from your big dream house and you're trying to find that same house, you're probably going to take a little bit of emotional pain initially. So hopefully you come into the situation realistic about what you're not, what you can afford, where you can afford and what's still important to you. Um, and it all so many things like are there kids involved, right? If there are, that changes thing. If there's not, like sometimes, as you know, right, a divorce decree may say, okay, we're getting divorced, but you people have to agree to live in the same school district, or you have to agree to live within, X number of miles from school and all those things, right? So that kind of draws our map, depending if there is one or not, and then becoming realistic. So it'll take a while, as you're saying, without a lot of money. That takes a lot of time for everybody because there aren't a ton of quote unquote affordable homes on the market, and that's a relative term. If you've got a bunch of money, then it becomes a little easier. Again, depending on what the geography is. So it depends on your expectations, time of the year, seasonality matters. Um, so there's not a magic number to that without knowing somebody's specific location, budget, what they're looking, because yeah, if you're just looking for a one bedroom condo, you can go find one of those today, right? But if you need a four bedroom house, at half what your income was, or close to it, at a mortgage payment that you can afford, that's going to take a little bit. How much do you want to put some work into it? Those kind of things. So there's not I'd be lying if I told you there's some magic number to around it without knowing particular situations. But a couple things, if it's okay, Chrissy, I want to touch on that I didn't mention before, but you talked about having somebody value your home. As long as you're not required to use a appraiser and pay that person four, five, $600, you can call your real estate agent and they'll do it for free. They'll do a market analysis for you for free. So you're not spending additional money. And I think in most cases, and maybe you can help me out with that, that's an acceptable valuation if it's something that a real estate agent does for you. So you don't necessarily need to pay a few $100s for an appraisal. So that helps from an asset valuation standpoint as well.
Absolutely. And that's what I suggest that my clients do, unless they are going to be refinancing the mortgage during the next like 3 months. If they're going to be refining anyways, then yeah, let's get an appraisal because you're going to have to do it anyways. Um, but if you're not, then I'm going to put you in contact with real estate agents such as Ron. I'll give you a couple of names and you can, you know, interview all of them or whatever you want to do or choose your own, and then they will do a market analysis for you of what your house would sell for at that time. And yeah, it's free. And really, if you are going to sell the house or are you're not sure if you're going to have to sell the house, the market analysis would probably be more valuable than an appraisal anyways. Is that correct, Ron?
They're used, yeah, they're used for different things generally, right? Like in a traditional real estate transaction, the appraiser's job is to let the lender know, the mortgage lender, assuming there's a lender involved, that yes, this house is worth $500 in my opinion in the current market and the current conditions. That's what the appraiser uses, because the lender doesn't want to lend you money on a house that's not worth what they're lending you on. Real estate agents do it from a more a marketability standpoint, because we're trying to increase an offer, not necessarily saying your house is going to sell it. Because like an appraisal gets really specific, where, right, I'm not telling any stories here. You go on the online and every house is listed for X 99.9, right? 499.9, 599.9, 699.9, and very rarely do they actually sell for the 99,900. Right? It sells sometimes for a more even number. Sometimes people do like to get a little funny with the numbers and some reason, and it's a really specific number. And then the appraisals a lot of times match what the actual offer price was, because you're justifying a value. They have a target. So appraisers in a purchase situation have a target. They know that the purchase agreed upon purchase price is $515,000. So they're trying to say, okay, justify the 515,000. So you got an offer, you accepted it for 515,000, and voila, the appraisal comes back at exactly $515,000. What we're trying to do as real estate agents is, yes, be within the market number, but also we're trying to get people into the house. We're trying to make it marketable. We're trying to get the seller the most money. So it's not necessarily very super, super, super specific dollar amount. We're trying to find a range, right? But still, as long as the realtor is doing their proper job and looking at the market comps in this neighborhood, and you've got a house that sold for 475, another one that sold for 525, that's an average of $500, right? Easy math. I can even do that. Right. So that shows that in that neighborhood, that's your range, assuming finishes and style and lot location, all that is similar. So yeah, they're a little different. Or like when you're doing a refinance, you may refi, again, the appraiser knows what the refinance amount is. They have a target that they're trying to hit, where we don't necessarily, our target is, okay, what's the price that we can put on this house to make it marketable and get it sold? But still, they should be within the same ballpark.
Yeah. And so that is, exactly what I wanted people to know, that that if you are going to sell the house, not refi, that working with the realtor and getting that market analysis might be even more valuable to you. And so I want to thank you, Ron, for joining me today.
I
And
appreciate you having me on.
and again, everybody, if you have questions for Ron and me and would like to schedule a free consultation. I'm going to put Ron's contact information in the post that you can then contact him. And my contact information will be there as well. And or you could just Google Ron. There's Ron Johnson with Crosstown Home Team and get a hold of him right away. And so, Ron, do you have anything that you would like to tell people about how to get hold of you or anything?
Yeah, if you can put my number, the 612-817-5657 is my cell. That's the best way. And then my easiest email address is Ron Johnson Real Estate at gmail.com. You can find me on my Facebook business page here as well on Facebook, Ron Johnson, Crosstown Home Team.
Awesome. Okay.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Minnesota. And we hope to be able to help you in the future. And I hope that everyone in Minnesota has a great rest of this sunny day.